Trays clattered, milk cartons sweated, and steam tables lined up like little factories of comfort. In Midwestern schools of the 1950s and 60s, lunch ladies turned government staples and local produce into hot, filling meals. Here's what kids actually ate: simple mains, sturdy sides, and desserts that powered recess. 1. Sloppy Joes. Seasoned loose beef sandwiches on soft buns that dripped in the best way. Cook's browned ground beef with onions in deep tilt skillets, stirred in a tangy tomato base, and let it bubble until the smell reached the gym. Buns came stacked from the neighborhood bakery or the district commissary, ready to cradle a generous scoop. Commodity beef and canned tomato products made the math work, and a pan could stretch to feed an entire grade with seconds for the hollow leg crowd. Pickles or carrot sticks cut the sweetness. Milk cartons cooled the heat. It was a Friday favorite. Messy, sweet savory, fast to serve, and it felt like a small party in the middle of math and spelling. Kids learned to fold the paper boat into a shield and leaned over the table together, laughing through orange-stained napkins. 2. Tuna noodle casserole. Elbows or egg noodles swam in a creamy tuna pea sauce that tasted like someone's aunt had made it. Lunch ladies whisked condensed soup with milk, folded in flaked tuna and peas, then stirred through noodles until everything was cozy and pale. The mixture went into hotel pans, sometimes with a crumb top, and slid into the convection oven until the edges bubbled and set. Shelf-stable tuna and soup stretched protein without shocking the budget, and those green peas turned a single pan into a complete plate with minimal fuss. The scoop held its shape, sat politely on the tray, and stayed warm on the line, perfect for classes that arrived in waves. It was gentle food, all ages food, the kind kids swallowed even when colds made taste buds shy. On a gray day, that soft warmth steadied a room full of chatter. 3. Meatloaf. Mashed potatoes. A thick slice of meatloaf under a glossy ladle of brown gravy, riding a hill of mash, the Midwest in one tray. Cooks blended ground beef with crumbs and onions, packed it into hotel pans, and baked off loaves by the dozen, saving the drippings for a quick stovetop gravy. Potatoes arrived by the sack, peeled or not, boiled in giant kettles and whipped smooth. Gravy bridged the two and made every bite feel like a home kitchen. Ground beef could be stretched, potatoes kept well, and the price per plate stayed friendly to the district ledger. Children learned the ritual: gravy first, then corn or green beans, then a soft roll to swipe the rest. It was Sunday flavor on a school day, steady, familiar, and big enough to tame after recess hunger. When the clatter dimmed, you could hear spoons tapping for one last taste. 4. Chicken noodle soup crackers. Brothy soup with noodles and vegetables, a cloud of steam, and that comforting saltine crunch on the side. The stock started with roasted bones, saved from earlier roasters or purchased cheaply, simmered with carrots, celery, and onion until the kitchen smelled like someone's front porch at dusk. Noodles went in near service so they stayed tender but not limp. The soup kept well in kettles and poured easily into cups for small hands. Crackers, simple, salted, wrapped in waxed sleeves, came with every bowl, because the pair turned a light lunch into something complete. Soup bones were inexpensive, noodles standardized, and the result fit any budget and almost any appetite, from timid eaters to kids back from winter playgrounds with red ears. On sick day weeks and snow forecasts, cups went out faster than the ladles could fill them. Teachers swore the room grew calmer after 3 spoonfuls. Turkey gravy over mashed potatoes. Shredded turkey in savory gravy, spooned wide over mashed potatoes until the tray looked like a holiday plate. Kitchens roasted birds when they could, but often relied on commodity turkey, steady, affordable, and perfect for pulling into tender threads. Pan drippings or canned stock turned into a school-safe gravy, thick enough to cling to a spoon and generous enough to soak the potatoes. The pairing made sense. USDA commodities kept costs predictable, and potatoes bought by the sack could feed the whole building. A side of cranberry relish appeared around November, and sometimes stuck around longer, because the color and tart bite made kids smile. It landed like a celebration in the middle of social studies, familiar, soothing, and quietly festive. Trays returned, scraped clean, and the line for seconds curved back past the milk cooler, proof that simple and well-made never went out of style. 6. Fish sticks with mac cheese. Breaded fish sticks landed crisp on one side of the tray while creamy macaroni filled the other, crunch meeting comfort in a way kids understood instantly. Cooks baked off pans of frozen sticks in steady batches so the coating stayed golden and the fish stayed flaky, then held the macaroni warm and silky for fast scoops. Frozen seafood made Friday menus simple for districts with Catholic families, and pasta kept costs predictable while guaranteeing full bellies. The pairing plated fast, traveled down long lines without falling apart, and didn't intimidate picky eaters. A wedge of lemon or a pickle spear showed up when the budget allowed, but the promise was the same: a dependable protein, a gentle side, and a little steam fogging winter windows. 7. Chili with cinnamon roll. A mild beef and bean chili arrived hot beside a frosted cinnamon roll, sweet and savory sharing the same tray like it was the most natural thing in the world. Kitchens simmered kettles until tomatoes mellowed and spices settled into the beans while sheet pans of rolls puffed, browned, and caught a shiny glaze. The combination made sense across the plains, where wheat, beans, and canned tomatoes were steady and affordable, and where one pot could feed an entire building. Chili held beautifully through staggered lunch periods. The roll turned a thrifty bowl into a small celebration. Kids argued about dipping versus alternating bites. Teachers stole an extra corner roll, and the smell of cinnamon lingered in the halls long after recess. 8. Rectangle pan pizza sheet. Pan pizza baked thick, cut into perfect rectangles, sauced to the edges and topped with a mild, melty cheese that browned at the corners. Dough spread across greased pans. Canned tomato sauce got a quick herb stir, and the whole thing baked fast enough to keep up with the stampede. Bulk dough and pantry sauce kept budgets in line. Cheese stretched flavor to every bite without extra fuss. It stacked neatly, sliced cleanly, and landed on trays in seconds, exactly what 100 hungry kids required. Some days there were tiny pepperoni bits like confetti. Other days it was just sauce and cheese, and still the line cheered. It wasn't trying to be parlor pizza. It was warm, square, and unforgettable. 9. American goulash, chop suey. Elbow macaroni in a tomato beef sauce that clung to every curve, ladled into tray wells with a satisfying plop. Cooks browned ground beef with onions in tilt skillets, stirred in tomato products until the sauce went brick red, then folded in cooked elbows just before service to keep a little bounce. Pasta made a modest amount of meat feel like more. Tomatoes were budget-friendly all year, and the pot stayed steady on the steam table. If a pan started to thicken, a splash of water and a good stir brought it back to glossy life. A shaker of grated cheese sometimes appeared like a prize at the end of the line. It tasted like Tuesday in the best way. Reliable, warm, and friendly to seconds. Tortilla, hot roast beef sandwich. An open-faced sandwich that required a fork and a little concentration. Thin sliced beef over soft bread, finished with a generous lake of brown gravy. Value roasts braised in the morning, sliced across the grain, and rested in their own juices until service. Day-old bread became the sturdy base. Drippings turned into gravy that made every bite feel bigger. It was a diner plate translated for a cafeteria. Familiar, thrifty, and deeply satisfying. The bread soaked just enough without collapsing. The beef gave a pleasant tug, and the gravy warmed fingers through the tray. With buttered corn or green beans on the side, and a milk carton anchoring the corner, it felt like a small restaurant moment in the middle of a school day. Kids ate quieter for a minute, then lined up for a little more gravy, please. 11. Scalloped potatoes ham. Thin potato rounds stacked deep in steel pans dotted with small cubes of ham that hid in the layers like little prizes. A simple creamy sauce, built from kitchen staples and whisked smooth, slipped between the slices so everything baked together and the corners went bronze. Cooks loaded racks, slid them into hot ovens, and let the smell drift through the hallway long before first lunch. When the pans came out, they rested in warmers so the starch could settle and slice clean by the square. Leftover or diced ham stretched far, the way lunchrooms needed it to, and potatoes kept costs steady through the longest winters. It was the sort of dish that felt homemade even under fluorescent lights. Pepper freckles on top, a little steam escaping as the server cut down the line, a soft, comforting heft on the tray. Kids traded notes about which corner piece had the crispiest edge, and the quiet that followed that first bite said the rest. On icy days, nothing beat a square of potatoes that held its heat, tasted like home kitchens, and made a carton of milk vanish fast. 12. Salisbury steak oval beef patties, browned for a bit of crust, then nestled into a wide skillet of onion mushroom gravy that bubbled and thickened to a shine. Kitchens shaped the patties in the morning, lined them on sheet pans, and gave them a quick bake before the gravy bath so the meat stayed tender but didn't crumble. The gravy did the heavy lifting. Onions sweated until sweet, mushrooms added body, and drippings tied it all together into something worth spooning generously. Ground beef kept the budget predictable, and gravy stretched every pound into more plates without feeling skimpy. At service, a patty slid onto the tray and the ladle followed, giving each portion a glossy, savory blanket. It echoed the TV dinner flavor kids recognized from home, only warmer, fresher, and big enough to count as a real meal. Some days it arrived with buttered noodles, other days with mash. Either way, it met a fork, like it had been waiting for it. For cafeteria crews, it was a win. Quick to portion, slow to dry out, and satisfying right to the last bite. For students, it meant a grown-up lunch that still felt friendly. 13. Tater Tot, Hotdish. A casserole built for crowds. A creamy meat and veg base spread in pans, then a shingled roof of tots arranged into neat rows that crisped and chimed when the spatula tapped them. The base varied by school, sometimes ground beef and corn, sometimes mixed vegetables and a gentle gravy. But the goal was the same: soft comfort underneath, crunch on top. Frozen tots and condensed soup kept costs predictable and prep times manageable. The kitchen could stack pan after pan on carts and wheel them out in perfect sequence. As the lunch bell rang, the tops had gone golden, the corners a shade darker, and the smell held just enough fried potato promise to speed up even the slowest line. A clean square lifted out without falling apart, and the heat stayed tucked inside long enough to make it to the table. It was the upper Midwest on a tray. Practical, friendly, and impossible not to like. A squeeze of ketchup appeared for lucky tables, but it didn't need it. What mattered was the contrast: crisp lids, tender centers, and a filling scoop that kept the afternoon calm. 14. Spanish rice. A pan of red-tinted rice that brought color to the line. Onions and peppers softened first, rice toasted just enough for aroma, then tomatoes and stock simmered everything to tender. Some kitchens folded in a small amount of seasoned ground meat near the end. Others kept it meatless and let the vegetables take the lead. The result was mild, fragrant, and easy to love. Grains separate but saucy, with a little sheen that said it would still be good by last lunch. Rice stayed affordable, canned tomato products were year-round steady, and a big batch could anchor plates without straining the budget. Servers used a flat scoop to press neat ovals, and the bright scoop sat well beside green beans or a buttered roll. For kids, it offered something different without being pushy. Gentle spice, friendly texture, and a warmth that matched a winter window's frost. For staff, it was dependable. No tricky timing, no delicate finish, just a pot that rewarded patience. It paired naturally with milk cartons and quiet conversation, and on the best days, a sprinkle of shredded cheese found its way across the top like confetti. 15. Ham bean soup with cornbread. A kettle of white beans turning creamy around a ham bone, the broth slowly shifting from clear to milky as the hours did their work. Onion and a little carrot sweetened the base, the bone lent a smoky depth, and the final stir mashed just enough beans to make the ladle heavy. It was the picture of thrift without apology. USDA beans, ham trimmings from roasts, and thyme, always the most valuable cafeteria ingredient. On the sheet pans, cornbread baked into tall, golden squares, the kind that lifted out clean and left a warm scent of corn and butter in the serving lane. When the bell rang, bowls or deep tray wells filled fast, and each portion got its square of bread. A simple, perfect partnership. The soup kept heat through long periods. The cornbread was sturdy enough to dip, soft enough to soak. Mittens dried on radiators while boots stamped near the doors, and the lunchroom air fogged with quiet satisfaction. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It was reliable protein, real comfort, and a reminder that good food can also be simple food, especially when it's cooked for everyone. 16. Grilled cheese tomato soup. Buttered bread met hot griddle and sang, the cheese softening just enough to glue the slices before the flip. Rows of sandwiches lined the steel, pressed with wide spatulas until the edges went crisp and the centers ran molten. Beside them, kettles of tomato soup steadied at a gentle burble, the surface turning in small circles as steam lifted the smell of basil and warm tomato. Commodity cheese made the budget work, canned soup kept timing predictable, and the pair plated fast without fuss. At the line, a triangle slid onto each tray, and a ladle filled the cup, red on one side, gold on the other. Kids dipped the corner to cool each bite, and the first crunch quieted the table like a bell. It was the taste of snow on window panes and backpacks drying on hooks, simple and certain. On the best days, there was a stray string of cheese that stretched forever, and someone at every table tried to see how long it would hold. Lunch staff loved it because it moved with speed. Students loved it because it never missed. 17. Barbecue beef sandwich. A pan of shredded or crumbled beef simmered in tangy sauce until the bubbles grew lazy and the meat gleamed. The crew stirred with wooden paddles, tasting now and then, nudging toward a balance that leaned sweet-sour and smoky enough to cut through a noisy cafeteria. Buns came from local bakeries, soft and ready to split by the bagful. A quick steam under lids made them warm and pliant. Sauces stretched modest meat into sturdy portions, and holding the pans hot meant every plate looked and tasted the same from first bell to last. Service was a rhythm. Scoop, mound, cap, slide. And the smell felt like Friday even when it wasn't. The sandwiches tilted slightly on the tray, sauce edging toward the paper boat, promising a mess in the best way. On game days, this was fuel and celebration at once. On regular days, it was the lunch that made the afternoon go faster. Kids compared whose roll had soaked up the most, and a napkin tucked under the chin became its own small ritual. It was cafeteria barbecue, built for 110 minutes, and nobody minded licking a little sauce from a knuckle. 18. Loose meat sandwich, made right style. No patty, no grill marks. Just seasoned crumbled beef kept juicy in a warm pan, scooped by the ladle into a bun that hugged the edges. Onions softened right in the meat, hinting sweet without stealing the show, and a bit of steam rose each time the lid lifted for another round. This style fit the line. No time lost shaping patties, exact portions by scoop, and not a lot of waste. The meat stayed tender because it never sat on a hot plate too long. It just idled in its own juices, ready for the next bun. It tasted like the diner, but with the speed of a school kitchen, simple and savory and oddly elegant in its minimalism. A pickle chip sometimes rode along, and a dab of mustard might appear at the condiment cart, but the sandwich stood fine on its own. In Iowa and neighboring states, it was practically a lunchroom dialect, shared, understood, and never fussy. For staff, it solved the math of feeding a crowd. For kids, it was a decent sandwich that didn't fight back when you took a bite. You could finish one and still feel light enough to sprint to recess. 19. Scalloped corn casserole cream-style corn mixed with crumbs and beaten egg, poured into shallow pans and baked until the top set glossy and the edges browned just a shade. The spoon slid in without resistance and lifted a soft square that wobbled politely before it landed on the tray. It was both side and main depending on appetite, cheerful in its simplicity, sweet without veering into dessert. Canned corn meant prices didn't jump with the weather. Bread ends turned to crumbs made the ledger smile. Eggs kept the whole pan together like a kind of quiet glue. Lunchrooms loved it because it held beautifully in warmers and cut clean, even when the line moved quicker than usual. For kids who didn't want a heavy lunch, it was comfort without weight. For those who did, it stacked neatly beside meatloaf or a pork slice and took gravy like it was born for it. The smell was gentle, corn and oven heat, something that felt closer to home kitchens than big institutions. And when a corner piece landed with those caramelized edges, it felt like you'd won a small, very tasty lottery. 20. Chicken a la king over biscuit. A white sauce dotted with chicken and peas, sometimes a few mushroom slices, thick enough to cling to the spoon, but loose enough to cascade over a split biscuit. The kitchen built the sauce steady and patient, whisking until the sheen arrived, then folding in the chicken so it stayed in bite-sized pieces. Biscuits rose on sheet pans until their tops shone and the bottoms crisped, then moved to warmers to wait their turn. Commodity flour made pastries possible by the hundred. Leftover or roast-up chicken found a gracious second life under the ladle. At service, the split biscuit went down like a stage, and the sauce took its bow, pooling gently around the base. The first bite carried pepper, dairy, and a soft sweetness from the peas, the kind of balance that makes you slow down for just a second. It felt fancy without being precious, like hotel food reimagined for a gymnasium full of tables. Teachers liked it as much as students. Everyone appreciated that it stayed warm to the last forkful. On gray days, it drew compliments that sounded like sighs, and more than a few trays circled back for seconds if the pan still held. 21. 3-bean salad. A deep pan of green beans, wax beans, and kidney beans caught the light like traffic signals, green, pale gold, and red in a bright, tangy gloss. The kitchen drained every can, rinsed, and tipped them into a steel bowl big enough to swallow a backpack. A simple dressing, sweet, sour, a whisper of onion, was whisked in a pitcher and poured over the mix, then tossed until every bean shone. It chilled in the walk-in, so the flavors could shake hands and settle down. Canned beans meant prices stayed steady through snow days and heat waves, and the dressing cost almost nothing to make. On the line, the salad added color to brown gravies and beige casseroles, a bite that woke up a heavy tray. Kids forked into it between spoonfuls of chili or bites of pizza, surprised by the pop of vinegar and the soft kidney beans that anchored each mouthful. Lunch ladies liked it because it held cold and never wilted under the lights. It tasted clean and lively, like the cafeteria had cracked a window and let in a little breeze. Dairy when the lid lifted, and the first forkful always crunched softly. Some kids hunted for the raisins like treasure, saving them for last. Others mixed the whole scoop into bites of meatloaf or turkey and gravy. Staff favored it because it made a mountain out of simple ingredients and wore the fridge well. On birthday months, someone might scatter a few pineapple tidbits across the top, and the line moved just a little faster. 23. Applesauce spice cake. The batter came together in quiet, steady turns. Applesauce stirred into flour and warm spices until the air smelled like kitchen holidays. Hotel pans slid into the oven and inflated into even sheets, their tops rising smooth and firm with tiny bubbles set like a constellation. Applesauce kept the crumbs soft without fuss, and spices did the work of flavor without leaning on butter or eggs the budget couldn't spare. When the cakes cooled, a dusting of sugar or a light sweep of icing drew chalky lines under the cafeteria lights. Lunchrooms loved this one because it cut clean into squares and stacked neatly on trays. No collapsing layers, no slippery frosting. The first bite tasted like cinnamon, clove, and school radiators ticking on after recess, sweet but not loud. Kids compared corner pieces and center cuts like baseball cards, and the lucky ones found a slightly caramel edge. Staff wrapped leftovers for the office or saved a pan for the next day's snack cart, and no one complained about day-old. It was bake sale energy on a Tuesday, served with a carton of milk and a grin. 24. Apple crisp steam lifted from the pans the moment the lids tilted back, carrying apple and butter and toasted oats straight to the doorway. The kitchen stewed apple slices until they softened, slid them into shallow trays, and blanketed the top with a nubbly oat crumble that browned into a gentle crunch. Oats stretched the cost of topping, and apples, fresh or canned, made sure the fruit didn't depend on orchard luck. The crisp held its shape like a confident dessert, spilling just enough juices to paint the tray without running away. A scoop fell with a soft thud and showed its layers: tender fruit, syrupy edges, and a crumb that crackled before it melted. It tasted like home economics class in church basements, sweet enough to count as dessert, but plain enough to eat on a Thursday. Some kids asked for a second spoonful if the pan allowed. Others traded a roll for it without thinking. Staff appreciated how it stayed friendly in the warmer and still spooned out neatly at last bell. With milk alongside, it was the kind of finish that made quiet in the room, spoons clinking and chatter dipping for a minute or two. 25. Peanut butter bars. Peanut butter turned oats and syrup into a sturdy base that cut into perfect cafeteria squares, each one firm but yielding at the bite. The glaze on top, chocolate or cocoa syrup dark, set to a satiny sheen that held a fingerprint for a second before recovering, like magic. Commodity peanut butter made the ledger smile and gave the bars their peanut shop smell as soon as the lids popped. The pans chilled until the crumb and topping agreed to stick together. Then a long knife walked the grid, releasing neat portions in a rhythm the crew knew by heart. They stacked on paper liners in tidy columns, the corners aligned like a map of the Midwest. Kids talked about them for days, saving them for last or on bold afternoons, starting with dessert. The taste landed right between candy and grain, sweet but not cloying, with the kind of chew that slowed you down in a good way. Reunions would later light up over these bars, someone always remembering the day they traded 2 carrots and a milk for an extra square. For staff, they were dependable crowd pleasers that never crumbled in the hand. For students, they were the dessert that meant the week was going okay. Cafeterias in the 1950s and 60s Midwest turned government commodities and local contracts into dependable meals that felt personal. Ground beef became meatloaf and Salisbury steak. Gravy turned mountains of potatoes into a main. Casseroles stretched a single pound across an entire pan. Fish Fridays set the week's rhythm. Rectangle pizza drew cheers, and chili with a cinnamon roll made snow days feel warmer. Milk cartons sweated on plastic trays, and bright sides, 3-bean salad, carrot and raisin bowls, applesauce kept costs steady and kitchens sane. Behind the counter, lunch ladies worked like clockmakers, sheet pans in, sheet pans out, ladles moving in tempo so every table got fed before the bell. These weren't restaurant plates, they were everyday fuel with surprising care, built to comfort, to teach thrift, and to carry a room full of growing kids through math, gym, and the long bus ride home. If you could roll your tray down that line again, what would you choose? Sloppy Joes with a scoop of 3-bean salad, chili next to a warm cinnamon roll, grilled cheese with tomato soup, or a square of that famous school pizza? Maybe you'd trade your roll for an extra peanut butter bar or angle for a corner of apple crisp with the best crumb. Tell us the lunch you still crave, the trick your lunch lady used, an extra ladle of gravy, a wink at the milk cooler, and the story that sticks with you. The smell of yeast rolls on a cold day, the steam when the soup lids lifted, the quiet that fell when dessert hit the tray. Drop your memory in the comments and help us build a real archive of how Midwestern school kitchens fed a generation. Drawn from school board menus, USDA school lunch standards, PTA church community cookbooks, local newspaper menu columns, and alumni oral histories from the 1950s, 1960s Midwest. Names and preparations varied by district, vendor contracts, and season. Historical best effort. Sources noted in description. Vintage cookbooks, newspapers, oral histories, archives.